So in the last video, I talked about 7 things that are different for me since the last lockdown. And it was a bit depressing, really, because quite a lot has changed. However, quite a lot hasn't changed as well. So in this video, I want us to think about things that aren't different, things that have stayed the same despite the last lockdown. So, the first thing for me, I still work in a posh shed at the end of my garden. It's a slightly different colour now because it's had its annual coat of paint and I couldn't find exactly the same colour paint. It's a slightly paler blue. But I do still work from a posh shed at the end of my garden. Second, nature, my pond, my garden is still my best stress reliever. It's one of my favourite rewards. For me, half an hour sitting on the decking by the pond watching the birds. Birds haven't noticed that there's a pandemic on. Maybe they have actually, because there seems to be an awful lot more of them and they seem to be quite loud and vocal. Maybe they have noticed that something's different. But I still use that as my stress reliever, and I've been using that for years. Guilt-free time in my garden. Linked with that, I still make sure that I make time for myself every day. Just time to daydream. I make sure that I make at least 30 minutes a day for me. Not with my husband, not with the cats, or at least I try not to do it with the cats, but just 30 minutes. Guilt-free daydreaming. I still only watch the news once a day. Now, like the majority of the world, I think, we were all glued to our TVs, weren't we, at the beginning of the pandemic to find out what was going on. But once the lockdown happened, I realised that actually I needed to put my time and energy and focus into supporting people who needed support during lockdown. I didn't need to know the ins and outs, the numbers of the daily briefings that happened here in the UK. I needed to put my time, energy and effort into something productive rather than draining, overwhelming, anxiety-inducing, panic-inducing like the news. So I committed to only watching the news once a day, and I have managed to stick to that, so that hasn't actually changed. The fifth thing that isn't different is that there is still a need for people who are struggling with extreme clutter. There is still a need to help people who are living in lockdown with extreme clutter because they are not getting the opportunity to go out of their home and get away from it. So if anything, the need has got greater rather than lessened. So that links in with the sixth thing that isn't different. I am still helping and supporting people who want to use this period of uncertainty as a positive thing so that they can start to clear their clutter. Quite a lot of people, when we first went into lockdown, thought that they were going to clear all their clutter during lockdown. That's not going to happen. Even if we go into lockdown and it lasts 6 months till next Easter, you are still not going to clear all your clutter during lockdown. But you will be a lot closer to becoming clutter-free by the end of the pandemic. Now I think people are starting to realise that and accept that. A bit like the pandemic, actually, if we think about it. Lots of people thought, it's okay, we'll deal with the pandemic, the peak's over, back to normal. And that's not happening. Now that's exactly the same with people with their clutter challenge. Quite often people will go, right, okay, I'm going to have a blitz, lots of energy, lots of time, done, back to normal, I can move on. Lots of people say to me, once I've cleared my clutter, Claire, that's it, I'll be able to control it, and they don't. It slowly starts to creep back. Now actually, that is very much like the pandemic. We need to accept that it's going to take time for the pandemic to be over, we need to accept that it's going to take time for us to clear our clutter. And I am still there helping and supporting people who accept that it's going to take time to clear their clutter and want to use the pandemic time to work towards clearing their clutter. And the final thing, the seventh and final thing that isn't different for me, that hasn't changed, is that I am still making sure that I am focusing my time, energy, effort on the priorities and goals that benefit me. Remember when I talked about what we can and can't control, and I said we can't control what's going on out there. We can't control when a vaccine is going to be available. We can't control when a cure is going to be available, but we can control what we do and what choices we make and the decisions that we make. Well, to help me make the decisions about what I do and what I spend my time and energy on, I do the Wheel of Life. You may have seen previous videos from me about the Wheel of Life. I actually do my Wheel of Life review every 3 months, and it helps me identify what I want to concentrate and focus on over the coming months. Now, I did do this at the beginning of lockdown. That wasn't 3 months, it was less than 3 months since I'd previously done it. But whenever there's a period of uncertainty, a period of change outside of my control, then I review my Wheel of Life just to see what is my priority right now. Because certain parts of my Wheel of Life, especially with this pandemic, I can't concentrate on them. So I am limited as to what parts of my life I can work on and control during this pandemic. So I made sure that I did that. So if I were to say to you, what are your priorities and goals for the next 3 months? What are your priorities and goals between now and the end of 2020? What would they be? It's quite hard to think of what your goal is without linking it to something that you can't actually control. So again, take a moment to think about what hasn't changed for you since the last lockdown. What hasn't changed? What has stayed the same? And what are your priorities and goals for the next 3 months, for the rest of 2020? Have a think about that. And I'll see you in the next video.